I don't think I have really spoken with so many eminent pastors sitting beside me. So I feel a little nervous. Perhaps it is good that they are sitting behind me so that I can see them. So that's right, so it works fine. Today I am called to speak about prayer as communion with God. And I pray that God gives me the grace, that the Spirit will touch my heart to share with you some words that may enable you to understand this mystery we call prayer. You might wonder, what is prayer? Many times we pray, but do we know what prayer is? So I'm going to start with what prayer is. St. Paul so beautifully said, pray unceasingly. What does that really mean? Pray unceasingly. Is it really possible for us to pray unceasingly? Especially when we are busy with the physical task of sweeping the yard, washing the clothes, washing down the pots, looking after the children, and then pray unceasingly. Or those of us who are teachers who know what it really means. To teach 40 kids mathematics, science, social studies, and pray unceasingly at the same time? Well, if St. Paul says pray unceasingly, I'm sure it is possible to pray unceasingly. Our Catholic tradition has St. Teresa of Child Jesus. A young lady at the age of 24 died of tuberculosis and left behind a trail of sanctity that the Church considers as a great saint. Someone whose life is worthy of imitation. And she seems to have said, never 3 minutes passed by without she turning her mind to God. Never 3 minutes passed by without she turning her mind to God. Mind you, it happened she died in 1897. Without cell phones, without internet, without WhatsApp and text message bothering us, perhaps it was possible to spend unceasingly with God in time and prayer. But what about today in our world? I would think perhaps it is still possible for us. Every time your phone rings, you say to yourself, Jesus, I love you, and pick up the phone. I say it within yourself, because sometimes you will pick up the phone and you forget to say Jesus, and you will sound to the other person, I love you. It will not sound too good. So say it within yourself, Jesus, I love you, and pick up the phone and say hello. You have already turned your mind to God. And that is prayer. Or those of us drive around, or those of in a bus, when somebody blows a horn, which happens too many times in our Jamaica, say noise pollution. Yes. Say Jesus, I love you. Now again, you are turning your mind to God. When you hear a bird twittering, say Jesus, I love you. That's right. Any sound you hear, Jesus, I love you. That means every sound can remind you of the presence of God in you and around you, that you can quickly turn your mind to God. You are praying. So prayer, what is prayer? Prayer is really lifting up our heart to God, our mind to God. Now that is a very traditional definition of prayer. Lifting up our mind and heart to God. Now, how do we do that? Lifting up our mind and heart to God. How do we do that? Jesus gives a beautiful answer. He says, when you go to pray, go to your room, shut the door, and pray to your Father in secret. And the Father who sees what you do in secret will reward you. It's not so much about the reward that we will pray. But I would really like to see what Jesus tells about go to your room, shut the door, and pray. I come from Waterhouse. And many of my church members have a small house. Maybe 1 room, 2 rooms, 3 rooms maximum. And too many people to live in the house. So they cannot just simply go to your room, lock the door, and sit down to pray. What about the rest of the family? So I begin to reflect upon to see the reality of how our people can actually pray unceasingly, and how can they really pray, taking the mandate of Jesus to go to your room, shut the door, and pray. Then I realized it really wasn't physically Jesus is asking us to shut the door. It really wasn't. Because we are called to pray unceasingly, which means every moment. And if we must always go to your room and lock the door, which is almost impossible. People like us always move around. How do we pray unceasingly if we are in a bus traveling down with what they call music, what I call noise, later in 2 years. We can still pray unceasingly. But that's what Jesus says, you must shut the doors and pray. What does it really mean shutting the doors to pray? It really is that the doors, the windows are by which the world enters into us. The sound comes to us, people walk inside, people peek through the window. Now the same way, we have windows and doors in our life too. Our senses, the hearing, our eyes, our nose, yeah, that too. So all of these really can trouble us from staying focused on God. Things that distract us in the world today. So if we begin to shut off our senses one by one, we can pray in the marketplace. I mean even Coronation Market. You can be there, close your eyes for a moment, or even open your eyes and sit down there and we pray. And actually, many of us do that all the time. We don't realize we do that. Say for example, the preacher is preaching like I'm preaching now, you're looking straight into my eyes, and maybe your body is looking at me, your eyes are looking at me, but you are not here. Your mind is somewhere else right now. But that's exactly what I'm asking you to do. You are placed in Coronation Market, but your mind is associated with God. It's just that your mind is lifted up to God, taken up to Him. You are praying. Now that's the prayer that I'm talking about. So really, how do we do this? This really is what we call the single-minded devotion that we must offer to God. That's prayer unceasing. Prayer is a personal relationship with God. Very, very personal. It's just you and Him. Nobody else is required. You don't need to have a whole church. It's good to pray together as a social church community. But you can pray alone, and we pray alone. It's a personal, intimate relationship to God that is cultivated daily. It doesn't happen by itself. We cultivate it daily. It's a sacred moment shared with the Maker, and that is cherished each day. Each moment. Because it is so special. It is lifting up our mind and heart to God, but very consciously and willingly. Which really means prayer is an action. It is an action. As an action, it requires energy. And I know I am speaking from personal experience. When I really sit down to pray, when I finish my praying, I sweat. I'm profuse, soaked through. And even if it is sitting in an air-conditioned room, that's because so much spiritual energy comes out of you. So much warmth of God's love pours into you. You begin to feel the warmth externally manifesting. You begin to sweat. Sweat it out. So prayer is an action. It is energy-packed action. Which is why when Jesus tells us to shut the door, it's a necessity. It's a must. In order to enter into this personal, intimate relationship with God, our Maker. So we shut the door of our ears, even our external hearing, so the inner ears are opened to hear the voice of God. And it is necessary. We shut the external eye from seeing things not conducive to developing a relationship with God, so the inner eye can be opened to gaze upon the vision of God as He reveals Himself to us in the ordinariness of our life. We shut the external mouth from useless chatter, so the praise of God can constantly arise from our inner self and fill the world with God's praise. And it sounds good, isn't it? Actually, it sounds too good to be true. Because I'm talking from my personal experience. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is very, very weak. It is so weak that every time you sit down to pray, oh yeah, it's like me and my pastor. Usually I don't have my breakfast. And I run my life without breakfast for a very long time. Until my parents came to live with me about 3 years ago now. Now they are with me from India. So now they forced me to come home to have lunch with them at 2:30. Otherwise I will go without lunch, and I will actually have one meal about 10 o'clock in the night. That's it. In between I'll have a cup of tea or coffee, and that keeps me fine. I was perfectly alright, never felt hungry. But the day I want to fast, you know what that means, no? 7 o'clock in the morning, I go for my service, I finish the service and come out of the service. I even take off my vestments or sacred robe, and I feel terribly hungry. And I know what it really means. I need food right now. It's like I'm collapsing, I have low energy left. I have to eat now. Well, okay, I go eat something and I say, you know what? Real fasting is one full meal and two small snacks that should not make one full